Right. The next step in creating our model is to work on creating the geometry. So to start on that, we double click on the geometry icon. So double click there. And you'll see down the bottom left that we are starting the design modeler. It'll take a little while to launch. And there it is. How fast it launches will depend on what's going on in your system in any given day. All right, so in the window here, we have three main windows. We have the graphics window, where obviously all our objects will appear. We have the tree outline, where all the operations that we undertake will appear. And of course, a list of all the bodies that we create will appear. And the details view. Now, each time we have an operation, the details, the parameters of that operation will appear in the details view. All right. The rest of the menus we'll sort of get used to as we work with them. So our first operation here is we need to create a bend to start our mixing elbow. And to do that, we're going to go to Create at the top. Actually, the first thing we're going to do before we go to Create is we're going to go to the units. We're going to reset the units to millimeters, just because that suits the object that we're doing better here. I think the initial scale bar said 30 meters. Now it says 70 millimeters, and that's much better suited to our object. All right, so to create our first object, we go to Create, Primitives, and Torus. And so now you can see a grey wireframe in the main window showing our torus. We can see in the tree outline that we've got an operation called Torus1 with a little lightning bolt next to it. Now, we can rename that operation down here in the details view. We're going to call this Torus bend. Good to rename things, because when you have really complex geometry, sometimes you want to know what each operation represents. All right, now in the details view, the first thing that's important here is the operation. We're adding material. So that means it's going to add solid material to the domain. Now, if you have multiple bodies in the domain and they overlap, then add material will merge those bodies together. Right, next up, of course, is the axis. And the origin of the torus is 0, 0, 0. So, sorry, we're getting now into the dimensions of the torus itself. So the origin is at 0, 0, 0. That's where we want it to. The axis is 0, 0, 1. Now, that means it's rotating about the z-axis, which is what we want. This torus is aligned in the xy plane. And the base. Now, the base is where the torus officially starts from. And where that becomes important is when we change the angle to 90 degrees, it determines what the orientation will be. Now, in this case, the base is a vector that goes from the origin to the base. So that means we're going 0, 1, 0. So this is the base. Now, we would actually like this to be starting from down the bottom here and going around this way. So we're going to change the base to 0, minus 1, 0. And now you can see our base is shifted to the bottom. So we have a vector of 0, minus 1, 0 from the origin towards the base. And our bend is 90 degrees, and that's exactly what we want. Next up is the inner radius, and that should be 100 millimeters. But you'll note we've got this little grey sort of grey wireframe of our torus. When I hit enter on that, it's going to disappear because we've created an invalid inside-out shape. So I have to put the outer radius of 200 on it to bring it back. And now you can see down the bottom right, just the wireframe is just sneaking into the window. So obviously we've now created an object that's bigger than the window. All right, so that's everything. Now you can see next to torus bend we have the little lightning bolt. That means that this object needs to be generated. So we've defined it, but we haven't officially created it. And that happens when we click on the generate button in this fourth ribbon here. And you can see we've now created the solid torus. And under the body list here, if we just click on the little plus sign, you can see we've got a solid body. Now we'll change that to fluid later on once we've created all of the geometry. But we've got this set up now. All right, now, next thing we need to be able to do is manipulate the view, because obviously we want to be able to fit things in the window, look at different things at different times. And the controls for that are in the top ribbon here. And you can see as I hold the cursor across them, then the name of each operation will appear in turn. So the first one is zoom to fit. That just resizes the object so it fits in the window. Box zoom, allows you to draw a box and focus on a particular area. The general zoom, if you slide down, it zooms out, and if you move the cursor up, it zooms in. Pan just shifts the view, and rotate allows you to shift the object around, rotate it to different angles. And you can see it takes a little bit of getting used to rotate. You're not quite sure where you end up. Now, obviously, we've reset the view quite a bit, and we'd like to get back to our original view. So first of all, let's zoom to fit. And then you see the axes down here. We can use these to view from a particular direction. So if I click on the plus Z axis, I'll get a view from the Z direction. If I click on the minus Y, now no, minus Y doesn't appear until you put the cursor in the right spot, then it appears, and now we're looking from the minus Y direction. But if I want to go back to the original isometric view, I click on this blue sphere here, and we're back in our original view. So those are the operations that we have to be able to manipulate the view. All right, next up, we want to create the pipe. We're going to extrude a pipe from the surface of our bend. So we're going to create and extrude. Now we've got a new extrude operation. We're going to rename this to extrude outlet because this will be the outlet pipe. The geometry. Now we're going to extrude from a face. So to determine what geometry we're selecting, we have a selection filter here. So we can select a point, an edge, a face, or a line. So we select the face, click on that face, and hit apply. So green means we've selected it. Aqua means that we've locked it into the operation. Our operation again is add material. So again, when this creates, you should see when we hit generate, this will form a single body with the original bend. The direction vector, we have to define which direction we're extruding in. So if we click on that yellow box, go to face selector again, and click on the face, you see we get a red arrow pointing in the direction of extrusion. You also see a grey ring here, which represents the extent of the extrusion. And we can change that by adjusting the depth. We want that to be 200. So we can do that. Now you'll note that we didn't hit apply before. We can always go back. So click on the yellow box again, click on the face, select the face, and hit apply. And now we can generate. And you can see we've created a 200mm pipe attached to our bend, and we can zoom to fit again. All right, also note there in the body list, they've merged together, so there's still only one body. So we have one continuous body, which is what we want. We want one continuous fluid domain. All right, next up, we want to extrude the other face. So we can use create extrude again, or if you'll note in this middle ribbon here, there is an extrude operation. Click on that, and we need to select a face. Now, another trick that we can do, we could rotate the face, obviously, but if we know where the face is, what we can do is click on it in its general area, and you'll note that obviously the selector picks the face in front of it. Down the bottom here, we have a tile arrangement where you can see highlighted in red, it's selected the front one of the two faces. If I click on the back one, you now see a green ring representing that we've picked that other face. So if I select apply, we pick that face. Now, just to prove that I've picked it, we'll rotate it, and you'll see that it's highlighted in aqua. And our direction vector, once again, direction vector, face selector, click on the face, and apply. And you'll note that this time it's already kept the depth of 200 from our last operation, so it will quite often keep whatever you did last time instead of the defaults. This is all exactly as we want it, so we'll click generate, and we've added the bend. And we'll go back to our original isometric view. All right, so next up, we're going to create the side pipe. So we're going to create primitive and cylinder. And you do fluid modeling, you'll create a lot of cylinders. So we're going to call this cylinder side. Add material again. Now, the origin is going to be the center of one end of the cylinder. For this one, that needs to be 137.5, 225, and 0. And our axis just determines how far the cylinder extends from that point and in what direction. So our axis should be 0, 125 in the y direction. And you'll note that it holds a default of 30. Sorry, actually, my origin should have been at minus 225, not plus 225. That little grey wireframe on the window there obviously helps you if you're not putting things in the right place. But you know that it has a fault on the axis of 0, 0, 30, and a lot of people forget about that. So what happens if I hit generate now is, and I view it from the X direction, we've created this horrible thing that's sticking off at an angle and sticking out the side. We obviously don't want that. But you'll note that there's no undo or redo once we've hit generate. What we actually have to do is go back and edit the operation. So we can click on it. We can either, if we right click on it in there in the tree, we can delete it if we decide that that wasn't the operation we wanted to do or we want to do something different. If we just want to change the parameters, all we need to go is to go to details view, and we're going to change the Z component to 0. And you'll note now that in the tree outline, we've changed from a tick to a generate symbol. And our radius was supposed to be 12.5 millimeters as well. So we make that edit, we're ready to go, we hit generate, and now we get the small side pipe that we were supposed to have. Now, one more thing for creating the geometry, if we zoom in where the side pipe meets the bend, you can see we've got a very sharp angle down there at that interface. Now that's going to cause problems for the meshing, and it's going to cause problems for the numerical solution when we do the Fluent modeling. So it is going to give us some numerical instability. So what we'll do is we'll fillet that to create a nice bend. So we go to create, fixed radius blend. Now, because this is an introductory exercise, we'll make it a big fillet. It won't always be this big. Call that 5. And we're going to be selecting edge. So we'll select the edge where the two pipes meet. And if I just rotate that slightly, you can see that's actually caught the edge all the way around. Sometimes it's good to make sure it hasn't only caught half of it. So we hit apply and generate. And now you can see it's created a nice filleted bend there. So that will be much better for meshing, much better for the CFD model. So we can zoom to fit, go back to our ISO view, and to frame this up nicely, because we're about to save a picture, we can just use a box zoom to get everything to nicely fill the window. Now, we do need to change our solid body. It's supposed to be a fluid, and you can see the body is called solid, but there is an option down here called fluid solid. And if we click on that, see a little arrow comes up on the right-hand side. Click on that arrow, and we have the option to change that to fluid. Now, it would be silly, obviously, to leave it with the name of solid, so we click on the name, and we can just type in fluid body, and you can see in the tree outline it changes to fluid body. Now, we're pretty much done with the geometry. Our last step is we're going to save an image. So if we go in the top ribbon there, this camera icon, you hold your cursor over it, you'll get image capture come out. Click on that. See, I've actually done, this is a second trial of this, so I'll just click on that name again. We can write over anything that we've done before, so we're going to call this Workshop 1 Elbow Geometry, and it saves it to a directory. Remember, in Workbench, we created this folder, Workshop 1 Elbow _ files, and this user files area, so we're going to save it there. And save. Place the existing file, so if you want to overwrite, you won't do it accidentally, it always asks. And if we go and look in our folder here, so if I go back to the desktop, see, there was our original Workbench project. There's the files folder, and we double click on that, look into user files, and you can see there's our image saved nicely. All right, and so that's the end of it. Our last two steps to close Design Modeler. And now you'll see in the Workbench that Geometry has a tick next to it, and Mesh has a little pair of rotating arrows saying that's the next thing that we need to work on. So always when you finish each step, you save the project, because if you haven't had a crash, you've got a crash coming at some point. And if you have had a crash, you're going to have another one. So always remember that. But that is the geometry created. In the next video, we'll go on to create the mesh.